shut up, you listen to my monkey mouth. There's a companion when you got pun on the Kanoa route. Hopped in a portal and got in a fight, Elias knocked him out. Bow, Naruto fighting style. Bow, UFC he tapped out. Bow, we win, we get crowned. Monkey mouth, monkey mouth, monkey mouth, monkey mouth.
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another iteration of Armchair Mixed Martial Arts. On this episode, we're going to be reviewing UFC 282, as well as looking forward to the fight night that's happening between now and the end of the year. I'm not going to look past the end of the year, it's arbitrary and fun for me to do it that way. So, just to dive right off into it, Dana was acting like this was some type of god-awful card, and I didn't feel that way. Maybe he was just saying that the last couple fights weren't that great, or the main event, whatever. But either way, I thought it was all just fine. It was almost all finishes. Literally, I think the main card was all finishes, with the exclusion of the main and co-main. It just wasn't as bad as Dana made it out to be. But either way, let me just start with the early prelims, see if there was anything worth mentioning in there. Oh man, Billy Quarantillo looked amazing against Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez didn't look terrible. It's just, Alexander Hernandez laced Billy open with a hellacious elbow. So it's not like he didn't get his work in, but Billy Quarantillo's gas tank is just next level. And midway through the second round, he was just openly melting Alexander Hernandez, and it just got worse and worse for him throughout the fight. And by the end of it, didn't even make it to the third round. He wound up TKOing Alexander Hernandez by the end of the second. So once that gas can started to go, it went pretty quick. But so really great performance out of Billy. Always an exciting guy. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with him next. Chris Curtis got the job done against Joaquin Buckley. Separated Joaquin from consciousness entirely. Knocked him down with a big counter shot. Chris Curtis's defense was just next level the entire night. Joaquin just couldn't seem to get through his high guard, and didn't put enough work into the body to really turn the tide and make him drop his hands, and so that's how that goes. Chris Curtis, hella seasoned guy. I mean, way more fights under his belt than Joaquin. So, it's not a terrible loss for Joaquin. He's going to keep getting fun fights, but really great win for Chris Curtis. That's a big one, right? He just took Joaquin's thunder, and that guy had some, so good for him. Edmund Shabazian came back after the first time in a long time. Seems like he kind of got ahead of himself early on in his career, and I believe his manager's Ali, and Ali sat him down and told him, hey, you probably need to work on some of these other skills for a little while, kind of focus on you before you take another fight, and let's get back on the right track. And that's exactly what he did. And he wound up getting a second round TKO over Dolce Lungiambula. I butchered that name last time, but after having said it once and beaten myself up over butchering it, and then watching them say it live, I've kind of got it down. Dolce Lungiambula. Lungiambula was just a way bigger, stronger looking human. He used to fight at heavyweight back in the day, and you could tell, right? He's a massive human and was throwing bombs the entire time, but Edmund, his striking was just too crispy. Wound up picking him apart and getting the TKO by the end of the second round, 4:41 into the second round. And so, like I said, man, Dana wanted to kind of hate on this card, but this is all finishes, bro. The next fight was Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus, which, man, tough skid for the Daukaus brothers here recently. I hope nothing but the best for them, but they both got finished within a span of like 2 weeks of one another. So yeah, tough holiday season for the Daukaus brothers, and hope nothing but the best for them, and hope they turn it around. But Jairzinho got the win in 23 seconds, bro. The whole fight was 23 seconds long. Immediately binked him. And then wound up turning the lights off on him. It was, 23-second knockout at heavyweight. it's one of those things, right, where heavyweight is so crazy. It can be really boring fights, but the whole time you have to be in a state of suspense because at any moment these guys can do this type of shit, right? I mean, Jairzinho in particular uh, has now done this at 23 seconds into the first round in a professional MMA fight, and he's also done it with 6 seconds left at the end of a 25-minute fight against a world champion kickboxer in Alistair Overeem. And so, it's one of those things where it might be kind of slow paced, and you might not like it because they're not moving and throwing as much as the smaller weight classes. But I mean, this man possesses knock you out with one punch power from the first ring of the bell to the last ring of the bell in a 25-minute long fight. And so, the heavyweights have to fight a lot more conservatively than the bantamweights. Bantamweights, they can take getting hit a bunch, right? Because the guys who are hitting them only have 125 pounds worth of mass to put behind it to even generate force. Whereas these heavyweights are walking around at 245 pounds just throwing neutron bombs at one another. And so, it's always a little different watching heavyweight fights, but the type of finish that you got in that fight is the reason why they're fun and suspenseful. And then this young man right here, Raul Rosas Jr., is a beast. I'm a big, big fan. I watched him on the Contender Series when he was only 17 years old. They had him fight Jay Perrin, who's no scrub. He's been around the block. I've seen him fight several times at this point. It's been a long time, so let's go. But Paul Rosas, 18 years old, got a rear naked choke finish in 2 minutes and 44 seconds. It was a literal flawless victory. I don't think he got hit once. He's a fun guy. He's fun on the mic. I wish that he was speaking a little bit more clearly, right? But at the end of the day, it's an exciting moment. He just won. He's breathing heavy. It's hard to be really articulate on the mic after a fight. So I'm not upset at him because he does a good job with the promotion, with promoting and working with the marketing team. They've given him a push, and he's done well with it. And it also is a testament to the marketing department of the UFC. He got a huge pop. Which obviously Vegas is fight capital of the world. They're going to be an educated crowd, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, a lot of the pop that he's getting from the crowd and online is due to the efforts of the UFC marketing department. I just wish that they had more people so that they could give that type of treatment to everybody, right? Not just the guys who they feel like are exceptionally marketable. But he rocks his big sombrero. He shared on social media where whenever he was 10 years old, he had a cake with Robbie Lawler on it. So, I mean, the guy's about that life, has been about that life his whole life. He's young. He'll probably wind up getting burnt out at some point. But, who doesn't after so long? But either way, he's 7-0 professionally, won on the Contender Series, got a finish in his first fight, the youngest person to ever compete in the UFC, the youngest person to ever get a finish in the UFC or a win for even that matter. Checks all the boxes, positives in every direction. It's going to be really exciting to see the trajectory of this young gentleman's career. I hope nothing but the best for him. And, whenever the time comes for him to leave the sport, I hope he does it, right? Nothing but the best for Paul Rosas. On to the main card, which was fun. It sucks, man. We lost Yuri Prochazna and Glover, which, guys, Yuri destroyed his shoulder because it separated in practice, and he tried to have one of his buddies there put it back in place. And it just devastated his arm. And this is just so frustrating, right? Because on the one hand, guys separate their shoulders all the time. People pop it in all the time. TJ Dillashaw did it on the stool in between rounds in his fight with Aljamain Sterling. So it's not impossible, but at the end of the day, this is the type of risk you're running, right? Homie's got a gnarly shoulder injury that the UFC doctors are saying is one of the worst that they've ever seen, and it's because he let a dude try and pop his shoulder back into place who didn't have the appropriate medical training to do so. And so one of them cases of you fuck around, you find out. You fucked around and let a dude with no medical training try and pop your separated shoulder back into place. You find out by having your shoulder devastated. Tough night at the office, bruh. And then wild that Glover turned down the fight for the championship immediately. And then even wilder that Dana made the fight for Glover and Jamal Hill that same night, almost like a knee-jerk reaction. And then Anthony Lionheart Smith, who's already lined up to fight Jamal Hill in January, found out while he was broadcasting live that that fight had basically been yanked out from under the rug. And if that ain't a case of the UFC not giving a flying fuck, I don't know what is. I hope Anthony Smith goes to PFL and makes $1 million, or goes to one championship and breaks in some bag, gets a Lamborghini or something. I hope it gets done right, because that isn't the type of treatment that I feel like someone who has put in the work, has said yes to tough fights, has come in injured, has stepped in early, has taken all comers, has fought John Jones, has fought in championship fights, works the analyst booth. I mean, if that guy can't command respect from the UFC, then no one can. And it's just so frustrating, right? It's like an issue. It really is an issue where the UFC's, there's the fighter pay stuff that's going on, and then there's this type of shit, right, where I would call it nothing short of mistreatment. You don't do that to someone who does right by you. It's such a hard spot to put him in professionally, right, whenever he's learning that his professional landscape is changing rapidly, and to have to grapple with that live in front of his contemporaries and in front of the world is a really, really impolite and inconsiderate thing to do to somebody, just period. And I understand maybe there's just too many moving parts. They didn't realize where Anthony was going to be. They didn't think about all these repercussions, etc., etc. But that's not an excuse for me. That's their job. It's your job to think about this shit. It's your literal job to figure that shit out. So the UFC gets no passes for me. If they're so big and making so much money and they have so much going on, they just need to bring in more people to help manage the process. Then that's all it comes down to, because that's unacceptable. I didn't like it at all. But either way, we're digressing from the point. Is that the Robbie Lawler and the Ponziago Santanibio fight got canceled, and the Yuri Prokaznev and Glover Teixeira fight got canceled, which they both wound up having fights replaced. And we'll just get to those. And so the first fight of the main card was my boy Bryce Mitchell versus Ilia Topuria. And Topuria looked amazing. It looked like he was kind of loading up on his shots at some point, and that was kind of negatively affecting him. But at the end of the day, he knew that he had the striking advantage against Bryce Mitchell, and that it was such a distinct advantage that it made it to where he could just focus on stopping Bryce's takedowns and throwing bombs. And that's what he did. And he wound up catching Bryce with a few of those bombs, knocking him down, and it was in the second round. And he actually, if you gambled on this, if you made some fat fucking cash, he actually wound up Ilia Topuria wound up arm triangling, head and arm choking Bryce Mitchell. And I would have never gambled that's how that was going to be the result in a million years. But that's why if you take that bet, you cashed out. Bryce, I think at the end of the day is probably going to have to get into a bigger gym with some more talent where he can consistently spar against top-level guys so that he can be more comfortable just standing and banging with guys who are at Tupuria's level, and so that he can work his nothing's going to get your takedown game where it needs to be other than taking people down in semi-live combat environments and drilling that shit a million times. And he needs to be in there against guys who, it's one thing to do it against nobody. It's another thing to do it against a world-class person. And I think that he needs to go and put himself into the crucible and come out of that a forged katana. Right now he's just a sharp blade of untempered steel that he's been sharpening at home. Right, and that can get you really far, but I think it's time that he gets some real professional help to take himself to the next level, because he's, a ranked featherweight, and he's like being a dork out in the woods in Arkansas. Right, and I just can't imagine what would happen if they plopped him in a super camp and they were able, the meeting of the minds came together, and he was in there training against nothing but the top level guys, striking, grappling, clinching. Everything would just be nothing but top level guys. So I think we would see a tremendous improvement in Bryce Mitchell's game. But what the fuck do I know? I'm just a podcaster. Shut the fuck up. But the next fight was Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis. The S is silent at the end, motherfucker. Get it right. Darren, which, by the way, for some reason, that just pinged to me. I didn't do any of my reaction videos for this fight card, so if you were looking for those, sorry, my priorities are right. I was in Louisiana visiting family, and I wasn't trying to waste my time making videos whenever I'm visiting family. My priority is to spend that time with my family, so that's life. Y'all are gonna miss some content every here and there, because that's the type of person I am. But Darren Till and Dricus du Plessis fought. Dricus du Plessis got a submission in the third round. I thought that Darren was going to win this fight by the end of it. I picked Dricus, I believe, in the podcast before this one. But Dricus almost finished Darren Till in the first round, but he kind of cashed himself out. Kind of gassed himself out trying to chase the finish. And Darren Till's got a hellacious gas tank. And Darren Till came out, and I thought he was going to finish Dricus in the second round, right? Dricus got on top of Till in the first round, was ground and pounding him, and I thought he was going to be able to finish the fight. Then Darren Till was beating up on a tired-out Dricus in the second round and had him on his back foot, and I thought Darren Till was going to be able to get the finish. And then in the third round, Dricus wound up getting the takedown and getting the submission about halfway through the third round. So it was a really, really good performance. I thought that Darren Till was probably getting pretty close to the chopping block, but with this being fight of the night, it was a hellacious fight, super fun fight. What can you do whenever, you go out there and you put on a good performance like that, people love that shit, they want asses in the seats. So you do the stuff that people love and that brings people to put their asses in the seats. The UFC is going to keep you around, and I think he successfully did that. So more power to him. And, he didn't look bad. Didn't look terrible. I mean, he looked bad in the first round. Make no mistake. But, he just needs, I don't know what he needs. I know that he keeps getting outmatched by these wrestler types. I wish he could figure it out, because I'm a big Darren Till fan, but that's life. So the next fight on the card was one of the fights that had to get kind of reworked. This was the Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Alex Morono fight, which is originally supposed to be Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Robbie Lawler, which probably may have been a funner fight, but honestly, this fight was plenty fun. I have no complaints about this fight whatsoever. Alex Morono, they were talking during the broadcast about how, he wakes up every day at the same time, he eats every day at the same time, he trains every day, he's always in shape, etc., etc. They were saying how it almost seems a little out of character from the perspective of the broadcast booth, that he's a guy who's so rigidly structured would be so down to keep taking these short notice fights. But to me, it makes sense, right? The reason why I would imagine he's like that is so that he can take short notice fights, right? It's a matter of he's always in shape, he's always training, he's always ready. He's got a good set of habits, and those habits will take him through any circumstance he comes into, whether that's a short notice fight, a long notice fight. He's doing the same thing all the time, getting ready. And so it makes sense that he can take these type of fights to me. But He went out there and fought valiantly, but man, Santiago wound up getting the finish in the third round. Santiago just had more pop, the quicker guy, throwing and just was throwing a lot harder. You could tell that his shots were landing. I mean, he finished the fight, right? I say that honestly, Alex Morono knocked Santiago down every round until the third round. It came down to Santiago needed to get that finish in the third round, and he started throwing them bombs, man. And he's a seasoned vet. He knows what he's doing, and he wound up catching Alex Morono and got the TKO. Right? He went out there and fought the way you need to fight in the third round whenever you know you're losing the fight. So hella props to Santiago, man. It's really, really great to see him back in the win column. He's a great guy. He's another one of those guys who works the broadcast booth. He does the Spanish broadcast, the Deportes broadcast team. And so, I don't think that Alex Morono's stock goes down, right? I think that he keeps being that guy who's a fun fighter, who puts on good fights, who will fight anybody at any time. And that's a niche, right? He's going to keep getting called for sure, especially on these short notice events. And then here is the fight that has everybody fucking clamoring, the Paddy Pimblett Jared Gordon fight. Now, at the end of the fight, had Paddy Pimblett losing the fight. Now, I still look at fights through the filter of the old way, where they were mistakenly not prioritizing damage done. They're prioritizing the number of strikes thrown, octagon control, etc., etc. They're considering it all at once, right? And Big John McCarthy has said on his podcast a few times, and I think that John McCarthy saying this shit out loud is one of the big things that helped change how it's being judged, is that you look at damage first, and if someone damaged the other fighter more, they won. You don't need to look at anything else. It doesn't matter if that other guy controlled the entire octagon, threw more punches, won every grappling exchange, won every clinch exchange, won every facet of the fight except for damage dealt. You lose. It's about hurting the other man at this point, and that's the way it was supposed to be. And the judges kind of got away from that, and I think that something happened, right? I mean, people are openly talking about how now damage is the number one priority that the judges are looking at, and so with that in mind, I can certainly see how Paddy got the nod for sure, because to my mind, knowing that the judges are sincerely prioritizing damage these days now, it's Paddy won the first and second round and lost the third. That's the end of the story. I think that if they were not letting the discussion stop at damage, right? If they were doing it like they were doing it 6 months ago, where they would go, yeah, he damaged him more, but the other guy controlled the octagon and did this and that, and let's consider all that. And with that all in mind, we think the other guy won the round. Nowadays, you got hurt worse that round, you lost that round, homie. Is that cut and dry? And so, although Jared Gordon controlled the center, I'm sorry, it's not. It is Jared Gordon. I keep getting him and another guy mixed up. Sorry. But so Jared Gordon controlled the octagon. He threw more strikes. He landed more strikes, etc., etc. But Paddy Pimblett landed to greater effect. That's a fact. I definitely felt as though Paddy Pimblett's punches were landing to greater effect in the first round as opposed to Jared Gordon's. But you never know how much damage is really being accrued. You're not there, etc., etc. But the judges, two of the judges thought that Paddy Pimblett won the first round. One of the judges thought that Paddy Pimblett won the second and third. The one round that everybody was in agreement on was Paddy. I mean, even like the verdict machine had picked Paddy to win that second round. And then the third round, I think one judge just got it wrong, right? I think Paddy won the first and second, and lost the third. no one really damaged each other in the third round. Jared Gordon came out and controlled him, put him up against the cage until the last 30 seconds, and then Patty got on top. So I mean, with there being an equal amount of damage dealt between those two, which was effectively none in the third round, then you go and look at aggression, octagon control, and Jared Gordon was the one pushing forward, which is aggressive behavior, octagon control. He had his back foot to the center of the octagon. He's controlling the octagon. And at that point, clearly based on the criteria that are remaining after damage is now no longer being considered because it's equal, Jared Gordon won the third round. And so, again, with how it's being judged these days, Patty really won that fight. And I feel like it's how it should be getting judged, based on damage, right? It's a fucking fight. We're here to whoop each other's ass. Who hurt the other guy worse? It's very clearly Patty won that fight, right? His face wasn't hurt at all. Jared looked like he got beat up. And so literally you can look at the two guys after the press conference and go, I could see who won. And so, even if you really did feel like Jared Gordon won, which I did, I felt like Jared Gordon won at the end of the fight because I've been watching MMA my whole life and I'm passing it through the filter of who I'm expecting to win based on how fights have been judged previous, not who I really feel like won the fight in my heart. In my heart of hearts, I felt like Patty dealt more damage and he really won the fight. When I was watching the fight and the fight ended and I go, man, who do I think is going to win that? Like, who's going to get their hand raised right now? I thought Jared Gordon was going to get his hand raised. I think that's an important distinction to make because a lot of people are talking about this fight and there's been a pretty significant change in the way that these fights are being judged in the last 6 months. And so a lot of us are still kind of passing these fights through the filter of previous experience, and we're not in the previous experience zone anymore. We're in the they're doing it the new way zone. And so, I just got caught up looking at it through the old way. And after looking at it and after thinking about it and reminding myself of the priorities of the judges these days, it makes good sense how they got the win. No one got robbed. That's for sure. It was close enough to where I'm not prepared to call it a robbery either way. If Jared won, I wouldn't have called it a robbery. If Patty had won, I'm still not calling it a robbery. And the flack that Patty's catching online is nuts. It's so weird how ugly people are online to one another. I've never understood it. If you guys are going to be ugly to me, I'm going to block y'all. You know what I'm saying? There's no patience for this shit. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why everybody's trying to tear each other down. And on the subject of tearing each other down, Patty Pimblett and Ariel Helwani are now in some type of beef, right? Which, according to everything that I've read at this point, it's basically that Patty was in the vicinity of Ariel, and Ariel caught wind of that, and Ariel reached out trying to see if he'd do an interview, and the time slot that Ariel had available was during the same time whenever Patty had an interview that he was going to get paid to do. And so his manager let Ariel know that, hey, we have this other thing going on. We're getting paid to do it. And so if we're going to step away from that to do something with you, we're going to need to get paid. And that turned into this big deal where Ariel got upset about how he doesn't pay his interviewees. And it just somehow spun off from there, right? But evidently this was the catalyzing thing where Ariel wanted Patty to come and do an interview for free when Patty already had something else lined up that he was going to get paid for. And they were trying to meet in the middle where Patty's like, I want to come do your interview. I'd rather do your interview, but I'm also not prepared to turn down money. So, who knows? I wasn't there. I'm certain it'll blow over in due course. Everybody's got their big boy pants on. I'm certain that Patty's going to be able to squash whatever. He's a world-class fighter. He's nothing to worry about, right? He's going to be able to squash it. And Ariel's the top journalist in the game. These guys should be able to get over it if they're adults. Patty's not going anywhere. Ariel's not going anywhere. If I were them, I'd try and squash it so that we could break bread together. And, Another thing too is that people need to realize that Patty isn't a top 10 guy at lightweight right now. You know, everybody has been so conditioned by some of these meteoric rises, right? The Israel Adesanyas of the world, the Conor McGregors of the world, that everybody expects that type of trajectory out of somebody who gets a lot of star power. But understand that just because someone has a lot of star power doesn't necessarily mean that they're the most freakishly physically gifted or talented in a particular. There's nothing about the star power that Paddy Pimblett has that automatically makes him a top 10 talent. And that's where I think a lot of people are kind of getting hung up, is they're expecting, because he has all this clout on his name right now, for him to do all this like extraordinary shit. And the truth is that he's, an upper middle of the pack guy at lightweight right now, and he's having to work and get better every day so that he can stay competitive in what is easily one of the most competitive divisions and one of the most competitive sports in the world. So he's in there swimming with the sharks right now, and he's trying his best, and he's going to keep getting better every day until it gets, until the chips land where they're going to land with him. But I definitely wish that he wasn't catching so much flack out there. I'm a big Patty fan. I honestly thought that he lost the fight in terms of how it was going to go with the judges, just based on my previous experience, and so that's my bad. Like, I'll admit it. I need to really integrate how the judges are prioritizing damage as the number one judging criteria into my operating system now, which is funny because I've known that's how it's supposed to be for forever. And they just have never judged it that way. And it's been a bone that I've had to pick with it for forever. You may have even heard me talk about it in some of my older podcasts. I was doing podcasts before this change in the judging really occurred. And so, you probably heard me talking about it when I was saying it needed change. Heard me talking about it when I was first being like, I think they're doing something. And then now you hear me talking about it when it's clearly the case that they've made the type of changes that we all wanted to see in the judging. One last thing I'd love to do is if they could make it open judging, right? I wish that they could make it to where the fighters could see where they were on the card so that they could go out there and fight accordingly, right? I hate that, like Jared Gordon could have very well felt like he was winning that fight and just wanted to coast into the third round or whatever. So, I think that open scoring could make things a lot more interesting, but either way, we've talked about that enough. You guys need to give Patty some love online. And now we're going to talk about the main event, which was the light heavyweight championship fight for the recently vacated light heavyweight strap that Yuri vacated because he blew his shoulder out because he allowed a guy with no proper medical training to try and pop his shoulder back into place. And so you've got Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev. And, Dana threw like this big fit and made this big old fuss about it. And I didn't think the fight was that bad. I really didn't. I thought the fight was fun. The first 3 rounds was primarily standing and banging, right? Jan was throwing tons of leg kicks and was looking really good. They say Jan's got mammoth bones. That's why he can just go shin to shin. He can just win that battle, which is true. He's a big, thick man. But Jan was chopping Magomed down, dude. Literally had both of his legs in trouble. Magomed got kicked so many times that he wound up having to switch stances, and then he got kicked so many times in his lead leg in his switch stance that he just was fucked. And that led to some actual desperation wrestling out of him, which, about a little over halfway through the third round, he found some success with the wrestling, and then he just stuck with that in the third and fourth in the championship rounds. And so, I could see how the back half of the fight wasn't as entertaining as you might have liked for it to been, considering how exciting the whole night of fights leading up to it was, and how they were fighting in the first, half of the fight. But hey, man, some people wrestle, and it's not like he was terribly inactive on top. It's not like Jan was terribly inactive from the bottom. I wasn't mad at it. Not only was I not mad at the fight, but I also wasn't mad at the decision. It was a super razor thin fight fought by two of the top world-class athletes on the planet, and it was so close they couldn't call it. And, you know, one guy won the stand-up battle so bad that it forced the other guy to wrestle, and then the other guy, once he was forced to wrestle, did so good at it that it forced a draw. I think that's cool. That's dope. So whatever, Dana. Fucking get off your high horse. And maybe don't make a rash decision and fucking do your boy Anthony Smith dirty. Whatever. I'm certain them and Anthony Smith are going to come to some terms amicably. It just hurts my butt. But, you know, at this point, there's no light heavyweight champion. They've set up Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill in Brazil, which I believe is a pretty recent-ish card that's coming up. Not entirely certain, but I know that it's going to be in Brazil. And that pretty much covers that. I mean, we can go off into what's going to happen in the next set of fights. So the next set of fights, we've got Jared Cannonier versus Sean Strickland. And this is a really difficult fight to call. You know what I'm saying? I'm a big fan of both these guys for different reasons, right? They both have fun personalities, right? Jared Cannonier is like a really humble, almost spiritual guy into crystals, energies, stuff like that. Fun guy. Real fun dude. Like, probably a real neat guy to smoke a joint with. Then you got Sean Strickland, who is a fucking nutcase and is just letting his freak flag fly as high as he can fly it. It'll probably be an absolute blast to just shotgun a beer with. So, two opposing personalities, but it's going to make for a really, really fun set of interviews and for a really fun fight. It's such a hard one to call, man. I love picking Jared Cannonier because he was a heavyweight and he packs that heavyweight core strength and punching power. And, you know, we saw that Sean got slappity-slapped in his last fight, which, again, ain't no knock on him. He's fighting Pahea, who was able to finish Izzy. So, I mean, Pahea, he's from Brazil. It's in Portuguese. The R's supposed to be silent, but everybody keeps calling him Pereira. So, I don't fucking know. Alex Pereira. Wound up knocking out Sean Strickland in some really emphatic fashion, and it's one of those things where sometimes guys aren't ever the same psychologically after that, and some guys' chins never come back after that. So we have both of those risks to be considerate of when we're talking about Sean Strickland, but I do believe that Sean Strickland's a bullheaded dumbass dude who's going to have a real hard time letting something like that slow him down. So I don't know. It's like my heart wants to pick, or my head wants to pick Jared, but my heart keeps picking Sean. I'm gonna pick Sean Strickland on that one. It's really close, man. If it goes Jared's way, I'm not gonna be shocked. But let's ruffle some feathers. Let's pick Sean Strickland. Then you've got Arman Sakarian and Damir Ismagulov. These are two beasts. I don't know, Sakarian and Ismagulov. Who the fuck do you pick in that? Yeah, that's a tough one, bro. I don't know. I'm not prepared to pick any of these fights. These are all good fights. You know, you've got Amir Albazi fighting Alessandro Costa. That's a fun fight. Alex Caceres versus Julian Erosa, two OGs. Drew Dober and Bobby Green. I thought Bobby Green got released. The fuck? Am I tripping about that? I mean, I'm obviously tripping about that. You know, we could go off into the prelims and stuff, but hey, man, you can see it's going to be it's a fun fight card. Not like a ton of star power, but, you know, like the Arman Sakarian and Damir Ismagulov, that's going to be a fun fight, y'all. Don't miss that one, for sure. The main and co-main, for sure, are going to be fun fights. And really, all these, I mean, Drew Dober, Bobby Green, these will be fun fights on this main card, for sure. So, I highly recommend tuning into that. And that's a wrap on fights for 2022, dog. It's 2022 right now? How old am I? I don't know. Either way. I talked about Yuri blowing his shoulder out. Joe Rogan and Conor McGregor are having beef right now, which it's Joe Rogan's an idiot doing a podcast, talking shit, being silly. You got to take everything he says with a grain of salt. But he basically said that Connor looks like he's on all the steroids and that his piss would literally melt a styrofoam cup, which he fucking does. And I believe Joe was on a podcast with a guy who is effectively like one of the leading an industry leader in terms of steroid use and stuff like that. And to his mind, Connor's clearly on something, and they were discussing how you can get out of the USADA testing pool, juice up, get clean, get back into the testing pool, and be good to go. And so, call a spade a spade. I ain't got no problem with it. Apparently, Darren Till had torn his ACL before the fight and told Bruce Buffer. And Bruce Buffer's like wearing all the microphones and shit, and Bruce was like, "You want me to say something to somebody?" And Darren was like, "Nah." But I mean, come on. I guess, I don't know. I don't know why you'd tell somebody that right at the last minute. I would definitely maybe kept that to myself. We touched on the Patty Ariel beef. Oh, man, but one thing I didn't touch on is how Patty and Dana got together and had a big circle jerk hating on fucking Ariel. Ariel's so pissed. I don't even blame him. Rumors about Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor, but it's looking like Dana said that's not necessarily the case. It isn't actually confirmed or anything like that. But, Dana's a habitual liar, so who knows? The rumor mill is always fun to look at, though. The James Krause situation is getting dicey. Apparently, he may even be looking at some prison time down the road. The word on the street is that we definitely haven't heard the end of that. He did officially shut down his gambling Discord server. He sold his ownership stake in the gym that he was a co-owner in so that everybody up there could keep training. And it's looking like on account of the UFC handling the situation the way they handled it, Alberta is now accepting bets again, which is big news. But that's about it, guys. There isn't a whole lot of news I wanted to cover right now. And a lot of the shit that I was going to talk about in terms of news was stuff that related directly to the fights that we just watched or the ones that were coming up. And so I just kind of digressed into some of those points naturally. So that's probably all I got to say, honestly. I mean, really, I could talk. I could keep talking for fucking hours. But I'm not just going to sit here and take advantage of y'all's ears like that. I reckon I can call it. Armchair Army, I appreciate y'all so much for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. Hope you guys have a good one out there. Catch you on the next one. Peace.
Monkey mouth, monkey mouth, monkey mouth, monkey mouth.